Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me today. It's an incredible moment in time. Not only do we have a general election today, but also we're at the dawn of one of the most incredible and momentous technological transitions. It's certainly one of the fastest. And maybe we're also at the dawn of a new industrial revolution. So it's a good time to just come together and talk about what's going on. So Vivek briefly introduced me, but I'm Chantal Smith. I am a senior researcher at Exponential View. And as he said, we're known for our newsletter. We're a research and media organization. We also have a podcast, a TV show. We do a lot of different things. The idea behind what we do is to kind of make sense of everything that is going on in the tech space, kind of find signal in all of the noise and connect all of this technological change and the speed at which it's happening, and really trying to show the trends and make sense of it, because we're inundated with information all the time, so it can be really difficult to make sense of it. So that's why I'm here today. I just want to provide a small glimpse into the moment that we're in with generative AI. So I'll kind of quickly present where I think that we are, and then I'll go through kind of how it's being applied and how we're starting to make sense of it across different industries with two little examples. And then we're going to kind of narrow back into financial advice so that I can kind of segue into the break and then later on to the panel. So it turns out that AI is moving very, very fast. We all kind of know that because either we're in the field or you know because everybody is saying so. You see so many articles about it all of the time, and so you have this sense of always being late. But actually, it turns out that it's very difficult to tell how fast AI is improving. We don't have particularly good ways of measuring how well it's doing. So I just wanted to kind of zoom out and look at compute. It's a really good proxy for the improvement of models and how well they do because of what we call scaling laws, right? So the more compute and data that a model is trained on, the better it will perform. And so if you look at this graph, right, and this is the vertical axis is logarithmic, you can see that from about 2013 and increasingly from 2021, we have so many new models coming out that are really, really just exceeding expectations every time. And it's just going faster and faster. I mean, this is a cloud of dots. It's so dense by this point. And so we have all of these wonderful researchers like the people at Google that are really improving these technologies. And at the same time, we also have adoption that is following. So let's go back to ChatGPT. Think that they got to 100 million users only within 2 months. Look at the other people here, like the big actors, the other big technologies that might have had a similar speed. TikTok and Instagram, they're nowhere near that kind of speed. And even if you look more broadly in history, the spread of a technology that fast to that many people is almost unprecedented. And as we have all of this hype about AI and we tell all these stories and it captured so much imagination, now we also have the reverse discourse. So some of you might have seen the article from The Economist that just came out where they're saying, well, where's the productivity boost, right? There's all of these new technologies, but we're not seeing it appear in macroeconomics. We're not really seeing these effects yet. But let's just remember that ChatGPT is about a year and a half old. And I'm talking about ChatGPT because that's when generative AI really entered public consciousness. A year and a half is an incredibly short amount of time. You can't expect it to revolutionize an economy by that time. And sometimes because there's so much going on, we forget how short of a time it's actually been. Now, there's no wonder that it's been adopted so fast. It's really, really easy to use. There's very low barrier to adoption, and it works really well. It feels a little bit like magic sometimes. And there's this whole field of science now where we're trying to figure out really how it can make you faster, how it can make you better, how it can help supercharge your productivity. One of these articles that was done is one of the high quality ones, so I like to cite it. They took 800 Boston Consulting Group consultants and gave them a certain number of tasks, and then some of them had ChatGPT, some didn't. And on certain tasks, those that had access to ChatGPT were 25% faster on average. Their quality rose by 40%. And really interestingly, those that originally had quite a low performance saw the biggest boost. So it's also an equalizer. So brilliant, right? This was the promise. If you can supercharge every employee, that means you can do anything. This is every organization's dream. Except, of course, there's the flip side of this. There's other tasks, and a lot of research is finding that as well, where AI isn't really helpful, where actually it'll make stuff up, right? Hallucinations, or just people then afterwards fall asleep at the wheel and forget to check things. And so it's actually quite unhelpful. And this is where the emerging science is really interesting, is that we're starting to see that there's certain tasks it's really good at and certain that aren't. And the barrier, that kind of line between what it's good at and what it's bad at, is not immediately obvious. You have to go out and try it. You have to be on the front lines and see what it's good at or not. On top of that, that line, that barrier is shifting. It's shifting for two reasons. First of all, we're getting better at using the models. As you said, better prompting, better systems, but also we have more and more new models and the improvement is really fast. So this is a very promising technology, but at the same time, it's difficult to know what it's good with, and it's all just kind of unclear. So how are industries dealing with this, and how are people dealing with this? Well, according to one survey, there's many of these surveys, they're going to give you widely different numbers, but this is a BCG one. And so they've surveyed a lot of very large firms, and they found that about half of the companies are piloting a generative AI application within the company, and 10% of them are scaling. And so what goes into that word piloting is basically a lot of experimentation and seeing that some things are working, but also seeing that some things are failing. So let's talk about a failure, shall we? One company that had a rather public failure was Air Canada. You may have seen this news, but what happened was that they implemented a chatbot for their customer service, and the chatbot gave them wrong information about the policy about bereavement. So it said, as long as you submit a request within 90 days, we'll give you back part of the money. That was not a part of their actual policy. It said somewhere else in the website, but why would the customer go check somewhere else in the website if the company chatbot said so? So at the end, it went to court, and the tribunal found that Air Canada are in fact liable because it says so on their website. And they say, well, I don't care if it was said by, it was written by an intern or by the CEO or by LLM. It's on your website. Therefore, you're liable. So they were forced to enact it, right? So this is what we were talking about, the problem of hallucinations. But now let's go to a more positive experience. There's one company has very loudly been talking about how great their experience with generative AI has been, and this is Klarna. So Klarna, as many of you may know, especially as we're in the financial space, is a Swedish fintech company specialized in lending, especially to consumers for smaller purchases. And they, in this February, they reported that they had implemented AI successfully within their customer service. And then within the first month, 2/3 of the queries were done by their AI. Which is the equivalent of 700 full-time customer service representatives, right, in the first month. And according to what they've reported, they roughly have the same success, and they're also being appreciated kind of in the same way as the human. So there appears to be no real difference for the consumer, but it is faster. Later on, they also automated a lot of marketing. So they've been using other marketing agencies a lot less, using image generation, a lot of these different things. So they ended up freezing hiring, and now they're expecting to reduce their workforce by about 20% a year because they're just not hiring new people, and that's their general staff turnover. So what can we learn from this? I think there are 3 lessons. First of all, you've got to choose the right technology. That's because customer service, we've seen that in the example of Air Canada, but we see it here. It's not about one application that works or one that doesn't. There's a lot of different choices that you'll be making. And for example, RAG, as Matthias was talking about, retrieval augmented generation. I'm a sociologist, please forgive me. And this is going to end up being important, so you can't give up immediately, and you need some technical expertise. Second, you need a human in the loop. What Klarna have done, from what they've said out in the open, is that they always had their employees very close at hand. If something was a bit too complicated or a bit too weird, immediately give it to a human being and always keep them in the loop. And the third point is about experimentation and learning. And they did that through their employees. So since the beginning, they gave, I think they say 90% of their employees are using generative AI from the beginning. And that's because the CEO very early on said, I want to be OpenAI's favorite guinea pig. So they had a Slack channel with them. And everybody in the company needs to try and experiment and learn. And they've probably failed many, many times, but this is what we see has worked. I think this is one of the most important points, right? So let's go back to this. Half of companies are piloting generative AI, 10% are scaling. But what there also is more than half, according to this survey, of course, more than half of workers have used generative AI. This was from 2023, published in January 2024. And half of these workers are doing so without the approval of their employer. So what does that tell us? First of all, it's useful. If people are using it without having their employers telling them to do that, it is really useful and they're doing it themselves. And second, you have a problem if the people are using unauthorized tools. First problem is rather obvious. They might do so in an unsafe way. They don't really know, they don't have any guidelines. So they might put in data that they shouldn't, or it might be biased in some ways. You can have problems with that. But I think very importantly, you're also missing out on learning. Because these people are at the front lines and they can tell you what they need and what is working, what isn't working. But because they're scared of being fired or, automated out of their own job, they're not going to tell you what they've learned. They're going to keep it for themselves. And that is so counterproductive. So let's pull out two approaches and two starting points. First of all, the traditional way of kind of implementing these projects, you can take a top-down approach, in which I think the most important part when you have these experiments is to make sure that you have really fast learning cycles and that you can iterate really fast. Make sure there isn't too much admin and things like that, that it's all hands on deck and that you could really revert if something is going wrong, but also adapt and learn and especially take on board new technology. And then second, and the one that is most often forgotten, I think, or not talked about enough, is bottom-up learning with trust. Now, trust can be one of these buzzwords, but I don't think it's a buzzword in my world. You're going to have your people have a playground where they can trust that they can try things out without risking their jobs. Or you have to make it so that the people are using things, but know that it in their own interest. Not that they're going to have more work to do, but that they're not going to get any of the good things out of it. So you really got to incentivize it. And then from there, you need to have a lot of learning between people and encourage it. Because almost everybody that I talk to say, I'm underutilizing generative AI. And that goes from people that have some of the most sophisticated applications I've ever seen. And people always think they're left behind. But if you actually put in a system where people learn from each other and share and it's safe, well, then that's where you're going to get really exceptional things. And that's because of that frontier between what AI is good at and what it's bad at. You need to be on the front lines and see what is where. And that's when you can start and create new things. So now to the starting points and how I think you should first address the kind of AI problem. First of all, and very importantly, think in tasks and not jobs. AI doesn't apply to jobs. Jobs are human invented. The jobs that we have today maybe didn't exist 20 years ago. They're changing and shifting all the time. So if you divide what your organization is doing in terms of tasks, you can better apply AI and also be really flexible with your workforce and what capabilities are needed. And second, really think about what kind of data you have at hand and what you want for the future. So you might not already have your perfect application, but start thinking about the data that you think can be exploited and be really important. Now, I'd just like to go to a couple of applications from around the world that I really like. This image is, of course, Mid-Journey generated as well. There's been so much creativity and so many applications, so many of them we don't even hear about yet because they're in pilot phase. But here are some that I quite like. There's some math tutoring through WhatsApp, which has gotten great results, at least in experimental studies in Ghana. You can have personalized DJ on Spotify. Of course, writing code and detecting fraud, the things that we've been mentioned beforehand by Matthias and Vivek. There's also drug discovery and all these tools for scientists to navigate the complexities of the biological world, and personalized language learning. There's just so many different things that you could be doing. Now let's narrow back in to financial advice. So you have a couple of challenges in the industry. I'm by no means an expert, but one thing that could be considered most important perhaps is giving better financial advice and trying to close the advice gap. I've heard on all these events that this is something that is very concerning to many people. So how do you go about that? Well, I just devised this quick graph just to show that you can go in different places, but you don't need to improve directly at the core of the business. You can go in all different directions to try, which will then have an effect on your ultimate goal. Let me explain. So for example, you could go to the real core of the business and improve the quality of the financial advice, or help clients understand the financial advice, or they can apply new information to advice that you've given in the past. But you could also look at things that are not closely related to core businesses, to the core business. And this is often what you will end up liking the application. That's what Klarna is doing. That's what a lot of companies are doing, is that they're not risking going to the core of the business because that's too precious for them. And they're actually staying more far away on the edge. So things like onboarding new employees has been shown to be really good and really useful. You can keep morale high. You can also automate administrative or repetitive tasks. Those are some things that Multiply are doing as well. And then you can think more in terms of speed, just accelerating the process. If you accelerate the process, that means you can serve more people. If you serve more people, maybe you can put your prices down. Maybe other people can get advice. Maybe you can do more pro bono. There's a lot of different ways in which you can then help other people that usually wouldn't have access to your services. And then afterwards, you can focus a little bit more on quality and getting advice in different languages. Because, for example, if you're in London, a lot of people have English as a second language. Or you can get new insights from data, and all this is more focused on the quality. These are just some things to get you started with. Now, the takeaways that I would like for you all to keep from this talk is, first of all, think in terms of tasks and not jobs. But when you're doing so, learn and iterate as fast as you can. Make sure that that is a fundamental part of your process, and a safe environment where you can say things and not risk having any. You can say that you're not sure, something you thought would work isn't going to work. Second, promote bottom-up experimentation. That's what I was mentioning beforehand, absolutely so important. And also, I think if you have a lot of nervousness amongst employees, this will help say, okay, you're on board with us, this is what it is, and this is why you should trust that we're not just in a boardroom scheming to fire all of you and automate all of your jobs. You are part of this journey, and you are going to be a part of this journey. And then you're going to need trust, and the trust will come between the employees, as I said, but also with your clients. That's going to also come through transparency and taking responsibility. Like Air Canada, they had to pay up, because you need to take responsibility so that the next time people will say, well, they messed up, but at least I know that I'm safe. And you're going to need to foster trust with regulators, because they're trying to figure it out as well. If you do share a lot, as much as you can be part of the journey of actually regulating all of this and getting it on board. And you come from one of the most regulated industries, and you're touching people's lives in such an intimate way. So this kind of general trust, and especially with the tech community as well, is going to be extremely important. Thank you very much for having me. And if you want to talk afterwards, happy to do so, or you can find me here. Thanks.